what is going on? You said you've seen that behind the scenes of these companies and seen so many like pull back the curtain moments. What is going on? Because I think job seekers don't really understand what's going on in the lives of recruiters, what's going on in the lives of companies. So let's start with the company piece. What is happening back there? Like, what are they thinking about, struggling with? Why is it so hard for them to walk the talk?
I think what companies struggle with the most is getting out of their own way, right? Like, I think I've said this in a few interviews. I haven't had anybody really correct me. I think I had somebody correct me once. I still stand by it. I think it's egos. I think hiring managers, I think one of the reasons why hiring managers want to become hiring managers is to like be able to express their opinion safely. Like, I'm a hiring manager. I'm allowed to be a jerk, or I'm allowed to express my opinion now and get away with it. And I think that's what happens during an interview process. I feel like a lot of people try to insert themselves in the interview process to have a voice, to be able to peacock in their organization, when at the end of the day, realistically, like, if you lean on the recruiters for most of the interviewing, you should only have 2 interviews within your organization, then offer the candidate. I mean, it's really that simple. It's honestly that simple. In my opinion, a company should do, if a company, listen, this is free advice. So hiring managers, companies, if you listen to this sometime in the future, hi, but also here's how we set up the interview. Literally, first phone call, and this is for tech, right? And really, this could go across the board with a lot of other skill sets. But again, I come from an engineering tech mindset. First interview, 1 hour Zoom call. Everything's got to be Zoom now. Like, you need to build a relationship from the get-go. The first hour, the Zoom call needs to be about like 40 minutes, basically you selling the opportunity, you selling the vision of the company. And then the other 20%, or the other 20 minutes rather, need to be just asking about the candidate. Like, literally the first interview shouldn't really even be about the candidate, especially if you got it from a recruiter. Because if you got a candidate from a recruiter, you're going to be able to know, like, hey, this person's good. So you really don't need to spend the first call screening them a ton. You actually just need to sell the opportunity, because a lot of candidates right now are getting sold or called multiple opportunities, right? Second interview is a 2-hour call, Zoom call. First hour is a live coding challenge, pair programming challenge, right? Again, coming from an engineering mindset, paired programming, where you can see how the person problem solves. It doesn't have to be an overly complicated problem. And then the second last half hour is, well, first off, you can I said cut the plug. That's not the correct term. You can cut the cord there, pull the plug, cut the cord. I'm really bad at saying, you can ask all my friends. So you have that. And if it goes bad, you say, hey, listen, you know what? Like, this didn't quite line up. Let's just stay in touch, and you can cut it short there. The second hour needs to be like a technical screen with other people on the team. And then if you have to do another call for a leadership culture check, that needs to be within a 24-hour turnaround and another hour Zoom call, then pull the trigger. It's that simple. But I think what happens is companies think they have to overcomplicate the interview process because they're scared to make a mistake and bring somebody on that's not a fit, when in actuality, you gain more respect as a hiring manager if you just hire the person, admit that you made a bad mistake, and just let that person go. And here's the deal. If you struggle, and I'm pulling this from GaryVee, I cannot take credit for this. If you struggle with firing people, give them a long runway, right? Give them a 3-month severance. If it hurts you to fire somebody, just give them a 3-month severance, 2-month severance, right? That help. And I will tell you this, your team, I have been on teams where we probably haven't fired as soon as we needed to. And that has lost some respect of people, because they feel like that you aren't leading and you don't have the command of the team to be able to pull that trigger. And so it actually hurts you as a leader within an organization if you're not willing to let that person go. So
100%. I've been on teams where I've literally overheard VPs say, well, it's too hard to fire people, so we just move them around in the company. And meanwhile, me and 5 other people have quit because of that person.
Yeah.
And so these are things that just, they add up over time. And it is unfortunate that this is how companies tend to operate, because there's so much, there is so much ability. Like, if you look like what you just laid out here, and I appreciate you getting into so much detail with it, because
did I answer your question? I get a little crazy sometimes.
So do I.
So definitely.
I think this will just be the ADD podcast that everyone needs to listen to before the new year.
I love it.
So you broke it down into 4
people
pieces.
trying to take notes, like, all right, I got 1, I got 2. Where did 3 go? And I heard a 6
and a Z somewhere in there, a Z for sure. But you broke it down to those 4 pieces. The first call, selling the opportunity. Second call, making sure the person is decent, with the paired programming and everything like that. Third call, with the team. Fourth call, culture. What are these other 5 or 6 calls that companies are doing?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. And the argument is like, well, Taylor, we're not using outside recruiting firms, so we got to go through more steps. And it's like, no, you don't, right? Literally. So right before I hopped on this with you, I had a call with my team, and I'm like, team, we have to put in place everything I preach on social media. And I was like, well, we need to come up with a framework of what makes a good recruiter, what each skill set that we all possess individually, what we're really good at, and come up with a framework on how to interview. Because I think what happens is you have 7 rounds of interviews because no one knows how to interview and no one knows what they're looking for. So they just want to have a bunch of conversations to make themselves feel good about pulling the trigger.
I want to touch on that even deeper. No one knows how to interview. This is something I'm saying to people all the time when they're stressed out. I'm like, look, your interviewer probably has not been trained and is probably pretty terrible. So your job in this interview is to help them. Like, go in and just try and help them. Like, if they're asking you the strengths and weaknesses question and they're asking lazy questions, like, give them good answers to lazy questions. So let's dig into some of that right now. Like, what sort of things do you think people, what expectations should people have going into interviews of the interviewer? Because I see a lot of people, a lot of job seekers get so hurt. They didn't read my resume. How dare they not read my resume? Like, I can't believe they asked me this question, or do they even know how to do this job that they're interviewing me for? Right? All those things. What should a job seeker's expectation be when going into an interview?
Very low. I mean, incredibly low. I would say no one's been trained. I've not been trained, right? Everything I preach online is things I believe in, but I haven't been trained. I think for me, I think if you're listening and you're going to be on the job search in the next year, I would have low expectations, and you need to make sure though that you want to, that you stay with, that you interview with the company, accept the company's offer that feels, that vibes, right? I talk about vibes all the time, right? It really is. I mean, for me, some of the best engineering companies that I know that interview the most effectively, it is a very natural conversation, right? And to be honest with you, it's not even about your resume, right? People get butthurt. They didn't ask me about my resume. That actually may be a good thing, because I want to be honest with you. When I interview you for my team, I don't ask about your resume. I want to know who you are as a person, right? What makes you tick? What gets you out of the bed in the morning? That's the same thing, but you get the point. So for me, it's if you're a job seeker and the interview seems discombobulated, or they don't ask you about your resume, like, listen, no one's trained in interviewing. Very few people are trained in interviewing. And so for me, you need to be focused on companies that actually just want to have an organic conversation with you than try to force a bunch of technical jargon down your throat.
Yeah. And you talked about that in one of your posts. You talked about how resumes are not about beating the ATS, and they're more about connecting with people. And I very much agree with that. Whenever someone says beat the ATS, I always say, which ATS? There's like hundreds of different softwares, and each
that's like the
programmed
people.
differently.
It's the people.
Exactly.